Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here and to be able to introduce you to Psymark. We are the first ever digital visual motor progress monitoring test. And in today's webinar, we are going to really talk about our first ever digital visual motor tests. We have shapes, numbers, and letters. They are self-scoring and can be on most iPad generations. So we are a game changer really in assessing basic and functional visual motor skills. So today we're going to provide an introduction to our tools, including administration and self-scoring. And we'll also share with you how you can use our tools in your assessment and practice. Our objectives today will be to become familiar with the Psymark visual motor progress monitoring assessments, our shapes, letters, and numbers, and understand how to administer the digital assessment tools quickly and easily so that you can get valuable information on multiple variables within minutes, including graphs and progress monitoring charts, and to become familiar with how our tools can be used in multiple contexts. Great, and I think we have another poll. So Allison, did you want to do the next poll?
Yeah, do we want to see who's in the, what setting people work in?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, so it looks like 80% of our audience is working in a school and 12% is saying other.
Fantastic. So what is Psymark? Again, we are digital visual motor tools on the iPad. And we are actually, who we are is that we were started by a small team. We are school psychologists, educators, and researchers. We were out there in the field using paper pencil, rulers, and protractors, and thought there must be a better way to do this, that we are in the 21st century, so there must be better ways of identifying needs and really scoring so that we can get better information and more objective information to give those personalized interventions. Today, I'll introduce you to myself. So I'm Dr. Karen Silberman, and I have the honor of leading Psymark. I have had a long career in education. I worked as a teacher, a school psychologist, and finally as special education director. I've presented at numerous conferences, including AOTA. We just came back from AOTA and had a wonderful experience, met people from all over the world, really was great. Presenting at NASP, the School Psych Conference, and CASP, which is the California School Psych Conference. I am also the mother of a child who, he's now an adult, but he struggled with visual motor differences. And so I do have that understanding of how this can impact families of children. I like to say that I have sat at every chair at an IEP meeting. I've been the teacher, I've been the mother, I've been the school psychologist and the director. So I have a personal understanding of how this can impact people as well. We also have today Dr. Dana Kudaverdian, and she has worked for over 20 years to promote meaningful change for individuals with learning differences. She's presented at numerous conferences. She also served as president of the Foothill Association of School Psychologists, and she has conducted research aimed at advancing assessment and practice. She is a school psychologist, a licensed educational psychologist, a special education program specialist, a test developer, and she is one of our founding partners here at Psymark. So again, we come back to, we are the first ever digital visual motor progress monitoring tools. So our next slide goes into visual motor integration. And as occupational therapists, this is nothing new to you. You do have this in-depth understanding that a lot of people will call that eye-hand coordination. But it's a very complex set of skills encompassing visual perception and motor control, using the communication between the brain and the spinal cord, and using electrical impulses to our fingers and our extremities. And as we know, these skills, our visual motor integration, can be damaged due to diseases, to trauma, to conditions, specific learning disabilities, autism, a number of issues that we see in the school settings. Research on visual motor goes back quite a ways, but basically it is that ability to coordinate a motor response using that visual input. And so these are some good research information, some tools that we have acquired, but it's really associated with a wide range of disorders. And recent research shows a strong correlation to academic abilities and visual motor skills. Current assessment instruments really rely on paper pencil measures, and we're all aware of those. So current progress monitoring, this is a quote from Nancy Mather from her book, and it is that we had very little guidance available to assist in judging whether an accommodation for a particular student is appropriate and reasonable. So again, current progress monitoring, as you are very well aware, you are using paper and pencil. It's informal evaluation, highly subjective. So the children are producing their writing, and then the analysis follows that. Scoring by hand using checklists, and what we call in the field eyeballing. So this leads us to our tools, which are on the iPad. They're very quick and easy to administer. It takes between 10 and 15 minutes to both administer and score. They are dynamic and capture that performance in real time. So they are self-scoring and objective, looking at multiple features. We have 9 different features that our tests give scores on. So they can inform targeted interventions, and you can get that objective data for IEPs and writing goals, baselines, and interventions. We give charts and graphs, and they are highly motivating. What we're hearing from especially our OTs out in the field, working with students who may have behaviors and difficulties with paper and pencil, they're finding that these students are very motivated and don't have the behaviors that one would expect. So they know exactly what to do with the iPad. Our ages are from 2 to 99, so wide age range. Our first study was on differences between paper, pencil, a stylus, and a finger, and there were no significant differences. So with that, then you can either use a stylus or your finger in the test. And you receive results that look like this within minutes. The tests are self-scoring again, and you can see you get multiple features of performance. Immediately you can see areas of strength and weakness, which will then inform your interventions. And then you can use it for progress monitoring. So at your quarterly or trimester progress results or progress reporting, you can retest and be able to get information right away on the effectiveness of those interventions. And at this time, I am going to hand it over to Dana, and she will be discussing this next piece.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm really happy to be here. And every time I see the slide with the pencil, paper, protractor, and ruler, I have to smile because that was me for years, poring over, scrutinizing the manual and saying, does it pass, does it not pass? And then with all that effort, coming up with, a pass or fail score, which didn't really give me very much information on what interventions might be helpful or what recommendations to give. So it is really a pleasure to share today about Psymark's digital computerized visual motor assessments, which are self-scoring and yield valuable information for interventions and recommendations. Psymark currently has 3 visual motor progress monitoring assessment tools. They are called shapes, letters, and numbers, and I'm going to introduce you to all 3. Next. So here is an example of shapes, the first one, on an iPad. And with shapes, an examinee is presented with 12 shapes that become more and more challenging. And as you see here on the iPad, there's a shape above the line and a space above the line, and the instructions are something like this. You see that shape above the line, copy that shape exactly as you see it below the line. It's not a time test, just do your best. And that is what the examinee does. Next. And here's an example of the drawing. Next. Slide, thank you. And here is a photo of shapes, an examinee doing shapes, and here the examinee is using a stylus, and as Karen shared, you can use a stylus or the examinee can use their finger. Next slide. And the second progress monitoring assessment tool is letters for letter formation. And with letters, an examinee is presented with 16 different letters, and the instructions are the same: to look at the letter above the line and to copy the letter exactly as they see it in the space below the line. And here is an example of that. Next. Thank you. Here is an example on the iPad. Next slide. Okay, and here is an actual picture of an examinee doing letters. Next slide. The third progress monitoring assessment tool is called numbers, and it is for number formation. And with numbers, an examinee is presented with 10 numbers from 0 to 9. And just like with shapes and with letters, the examinee is asked to copy the number in the space below the line exactly as they see it. Next. And here is an example of an actual number that was drawn below the line. Next slide. And here is a photo. Okay, next slide. So in this next section, I will introduce the administration process, which is very quick, just a few quick steps. And I'll also give you an overview of the multi-feature scoring that the test provides. Next slide. Everything is done on the iPad, and one really helpful feature is when you're using the test, you'll have the opportunity to review the test instructions each time you open the test. They will just pop up, or you can dismiss them. Next slide. So this is an example of the home page. So when you open the app, and I say the word app because it's an app on an iPad, and you open the app, and the first thing that you will see is the home page. And before you can administer a test, an examinee has to have a record created. So if this is the first time that you're administering a test, you'll need to create an examinee record, which is pretty quick to do. In fact, the time it takes to create an examinee record and to administer the test, everything, it takes roughly 5 to 10 minutes, so it's all very quick. So if you look at the home page and you look at the button that is below the Psymark logo, it says New Examinee. You can create an examinee record by pressing this button. Next slide. And this is what the record looks like, the information looks like. There's lots of drop-down menus. It's pretty fast, and again, it's all on the iPad. And just one recommendation that we have is that you, for name, that you include a nickname or a unique identifier just as an extra added level of confidentiality. Next slide. So once the examinee record is completed, there's a save button at the bottom, and it's only one page, and the save button, then you can begin the test. You'll come to a page that is darkened, and you'll see a plus sign, and you press that plus sign, and then the examinee can take the test. And the next slide shows the examinee taking the test. Next slide. So here an examinee is taking letters, so 16 letters are presented, and they would begin and take the test, and then when they've completed the last image, copying the last image, then this next page will appear. Next slide. And this page will say test complete with a check mark. And you will want to indicate whether your examinee used their finger or used a stylus. And you also have the opportunity to write down any notes. Maybe you want to jot down something about the examinee's behavior during the assessment time, or maybe the positioning of the iPad, anything that you think would be helpful for you. You can jot down here to remember later, and then you would press Save Test. And when you press Save Test, next slide, before you can see the results, you will be asked to enter your PIN. And this is because it's password protected, and it's another level of confidentiality and security to assure that only you as an examiner are able to see the test results. Next slide. And so the test results are pretty quick. They take about 1 to 3 minutes to score. But just a note to say that you'll need Wi-Fi in order for the test to score. Now, this does not mean that you need Wi-Fi to administer the test. If you have created the examinee record with Wi-Fi, then you can test the examinee without Wi-Fi. But then for the app to score, you'll need to have access to Wi-Fi. Next slide. So with Wi-Fi, the test will score in just a few minutes. And this is an example of the results page, as Karen showed you before. And these are the scores that you'll get. If you look at the test results table kind of in the middle of the page, you'll see an accuracy composite, an overview of the accuracy. And This composite is comprised of the subtests of rotation, scale, which is sizing, line precision, how precise the lines were, and lack of noise or lack of extraneous lines. And the higher the score means that the exam shows that what the examinee copied was more similar to the model. You will also receive dynamic production scores, scores in real time, the how of how the examinee performed on the test. And these are number of lifts, number of times that the examinee lifted their finger or the stylus off the iPad, contact time in seconds, contact time with the stylus or the finger on the iPad. This actually has been very helpful for children or examinees that may have attention challenges. And so this is a way to gather and monitor that data. You'll also get data on average speed in centimeters per second. So did the examinee go really, really fast? Did they whip through it? Is this something that you want to look at and maybe help the examinee slow down or be more controlled? So it gives you information for that to monitor. You will also have data on line speed consistency, which is the variation in line speed of the drawings. So this first administration is your baseline. These are the baseline measures, which give you lots of information so that you can think about how the accuracy, not only the accuracy of the examinee, but how they performed. And this reveals there are strengths and weaknesses, as Karen shared. If you look at the single test results graph at the top of the results page, you can see it's like a results at a glance, accuracy results at a glance. You can easily see the strengths and weaknesses. And all of the data, of course, helps you design interventions, figure out, okay, this may help this child, and you can design interventions. If you are in a hospital or clinic setting, and I know I didn't see anyone joining us that was from a hospital setting, but sometimes the intervention is a medication, and there's a pre-test, and after the medication, the post-test can share if the treatment, the medication, the intervention was impactful, was helpful or successful. Next slide. So once you have designed, you've decided on your interventions and the interventions are done, of course, with fidelity, then you can retest, and you can retest multiple times. But you will see a progress monitoring chart will be available, and you can see the impact, the response to the intervention or the treatment. Next slide. Also, not only can you look at overall progress on accuracy, but maybe you are targeting like sizing or rotation or line precision. You're targeting one of the features. You can click any button and you can see the impact of your interventions on any of the targeted features. Finally, the graphs and the charts at AOTA, which we were just at a few days ago in Orlando. We have so many questions like, can you download the PDFs of the chart, of the progress monitoring chart, of the administration results? And the answer is yes. You can download them and you can copy them into the reports or use them in explanations to parents or families or insurance companies, whatever you need. Next slide. So in summary, I've introduced you to the administration and multiple feature scoring of the Psymark assessment tools. If you'd like more information, like to learn more about scoring and interpretation, I invite you to join us on May 7th for our Therapro webinar at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And at that time, we're going to take a more comprehensive look at the scoring and at interpretation. So now I will hand it back to Karen to share a little more about how Psymark visual motor progress monitoring tools are used.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dana. And yeah, so this is really an introduction to our products and to kind of get to know what they are and how they can be used. So in this next section, we're going to show you some ways where you could use these in different settings. So one is, and it looks like most of you are in a school setting, so it's really perfect for getting that baseline, the baseline numbers, so that you can use them to identify those areas of strength and need to develop your IEPs. So you can use it to write goals that are objective and give very concrete, clear information. And then you can use the same test for ongoing progress monitoring. So again, at those quarterly or trimester progress reports, you can show exactly how the student is doing in these specific areas. In the school setting too, it can be used for MTSS or RTI. So you can use it on general education students. We are using it now in one school district on all of the transitional kindergarten students, and I'm working with the OT there so that all of the students have been administered the tests, and we're working with these gen ed teachers in identifying areas of need and have developed interventions in the classroom so that they know which kids to work with to intervene beforehand. And what I'm hearing from the OT was it's such a pleasure to work with the teachers to prevent further problems, and also knowing which students really need those interventions versus those who maybe just need some more time with grip. So you can also monitor the effectiveness of your interventions. Again, it's targeting interventions and treatment. So our tools give objective measures in multiple areas of visual, motor, or handwriting skills to identify those specific areas and to objectively measure the effectiveness. It looks like most of you today are in school settings, but this can be used also in other settings, and we have occupational therapists using our tools in rehab and hospital settings where you need that baseline very quickly to monitor basic visual motor functioning for victims of stroke or traumatic brain injury, neurological conditions like Parkinson's or MS, where you can quickly and easily use the tools to find out how the impact of the stroke or TBI has impacted the patient. We are also being used in research, and we are currently working with a couple of universities, one in California, one in New York, to better identify for treatment of learning disabilities, developmental disorders, neurological conditions, but we are actively conducting research and working with universities and to continue to better understand the visual motor skills. So in summary, we have 3 tools, and these are letters, numbers, and shapes. This goes through a quick way to see the differences between our 3 tools. The first one being shapes, which is really an overview of visual motor abilities. And letters, our letters and numbers, our font was developed for us by an occupational therapist. And the letters that were chosen, those 16 letters, are a mix of upper and lower case. And the occupational therapist advised us on which letters to use as well, so that they're really looking at the developmental levels of kids. Numbers, again, are those numbers 0 through 9. So we're getting 10 different numbers. And at this point, we have a short video we'd like to show you so you can see how this is being used. Dana is administering the test to a child age 4. She has never had any kind of formal education, so you can see how she approaches our numbers test.
So are you ready? Okay. You see this number here above the line in the space? I want you to draw the same number in this space exactly how it is below the line, okay? All right. Just do your best. Okay.
Okay, excellent. So I am going to, whoops.
Are you ready?
This is always the problem with the video. So we will go to our last slide, and this is where we can have questions.
All right, so the first couple questions coming in, is there standardization or primary for monitoring progress from baseline? And along with that, are there norms?
So right now, our tests are not standardized. We are currently working on that, but we are in the process also of establishing cut scores that that we soon will be able to have cut scores. But at this time, the tests are not standardized.
Okay, good. So anybody else? Okay, so yeah, can this test be administered on any other device?
I can only be administered on an iPad. The reason we chose the iPad is because the workings of the iPad have not changed. They're very consistent. And so in order to get those highly consistent results, we needed to go with the iPad. Let me just add on to that our test can be administered on almost any iPad available. The only one that it doesn't work on is the iPad mini.
Very good. All right, so now we have some questions about the cost. So the cost of cost and how do we get it?
Oh, excellent. Well, you can get it through Therapro. So you can go to our page on the Therapro site. So just type in, search for Psymark, and it will take you to our page, and it has the cost. We are very competitively priced, so that it is, we are selling for a 1-year license, 1-year license to an individual runs $119.99, and with that you get as many test administrations as you would like. That is for one test for 1 year. If you want to get all 3 tests, the shapes, letters, and numbers, as you get them as a bundle, the more you buy, the cheaper the individual test becomes. And so for all 3 tests for an individual, it would be $239.99. But if you're also buying for a group, if you're part of a school system and you're buying for a group of OTs, then the cost gets cheaper per test.
And Carrie, do you want to talk about the per therapist versus per child? You know, that the license
Yeah,
is.
sure. Yeah, I know that can be a little confusing. So the license is for the therapist. So it is sold to the therapist. We actually set it up through your email account. So it goes to that individual therapist, but then the therapist will can use it on as many people as they want. So you will have, what it does is, and we'll go into this more in our next training, but you get a list of all of your examinees. So everything is saved on the iPad. You can access that at any time, but you don't pay per test administration. The license is for the individual, and then you can administer it to as many examinees as you want to.
Okay, so another question, will you be looking to include a sentence copy level?
A sentence copy level. So there are a lot of things that we're looking at expanding out on. This has been years in the making, and it looks simple, but it's actually very complex. So there's the short answer of yes, we would love to, and then the long answer of it's a lot of complexity in creating these.
Very good. So another comment coming through. Thank you so much for this information. I missed you at the conference, but my coworker made it to your booth. So thanks, Sherry, for sharing. All right. So then again, back to the pricing and cost structure. So if you buy a group account, how many therapists does this cover?
So it just depends on your particular needs. So we can sell to as many therapists as you need, and the pricing is let's see. I mean, so you can. The easiest way to do this is to go to our page on the Therapro site, and there's a whole grid of the pricing. So it just depends on how many therapists are in your group. But the more therapists there are, the cheaper the price gets per therapist.
Yeah, so if you have a group, if I can just, so I know 1 to 9 is the first level of pricing, 1 to 9 therapists. 10 to 24 is the next level of pricing, and it drops considerably from there. So again, it's all on the Therapro website.
And I'll send out a direct link with all that pricing information in that email, so you'll have it to look at and check out. Another question, can the iPad be positioned any other way for administration, such as using an iPad stand or support service to put the iPad on an inclined or vertical surface?
Yeah, it can. I mean, this is progress monitoring, and so you're really working with the kids and their needs. So I know the OTs that we've talked to who are using it. There is they're using it in the autism clinic that is through one school district, and those students may lay on the floor, and you take the tests on the floor. So since it's a progress monitoring tool, it's really being used in the best way possible that kids can work with it. And we are also hearing from our OTs that for those students who may have a lot of difficulty even using their fingers, that they can use their fists also and be able to take the test that way. So it's very adaptable and can be used based on your students' needs.
Because it's giving you information. So I know that in the autism clinic, that it gives them information about, sometimes I think lying prone, the kids have more control over their wrist. And so that's telling them something, and also helping them design what interventions would help that child. So everything is giving more information, and you can look at that. You can look and see how the visual motor changes based on that as well.
And there's notes, right, that you can include, so you can include that information, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And in fact, we we have created these. We started by creating shapes, and then it was the OTs that asked us for letters and numbers, and then OTs asked us for the notes, so that we really listen to people and take that information into account, so that we put in the notes specifically so that you can write notes about how your students are taking the tests.